The Great Wall of Los Angeles was begun in the 70s by Judith Baca. She hired several artists to create murals that represented the history of Los Angeles, and as she says, a history that does not appear in the textbooks. From the 16th century, from 1521 until 1822, this area was Spain. Then it became Mexico after the revolution with Spain. And Mexico reached all the way up into California, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Americans working here, the government deported the Mexican non-citizens who were here, but inadvertently they also deported 500,000 Mexican American citizens. But because we don't have to walk around with papers, if somebody stopped somebody on the street and they didn't have papers, they deported them. Thousands of people in the Southwest lost their land that they'd lived on for generations. Norma Iglesias is a professor at San Diego State and an expert in transborder studies. And she talked extensively about crossing the border, people who cross the border back and forth to work in San Diego or to work in Tijuana.
All borders are important, but this is one of the most dynamic, contrasting, incredible borders, not only in the US-Mexican, in the world. What is the narrative about this is that we have invested in security, the wall, and you are protected because of this. Two issues they're concerned. One is related with undocumented workers, and the other is illegal drugs. Mm-hmm. Both things are not stopped by a wall. You don't cross just for risk your life. You cross because there are opportunities for you. So if you work on those opportunities, and those opportunities do not exist, people don't cross. Things are more and more complex than what the solutions are. So the only explanation of the lack of connectivity in the proposed solution with the real problem is that there's one political agenda that is profitable economically, politically, and the real problem. And there's a lot of like a double discourses because there's a lot of people against this, but they are taking care of benefits of this cheap, vulnerable labor. Taking care of your kids and the food we eat. Everything we are eating is thanks to that exploitation of the people. There's people that are making 50 cents over there, here or that, and make products that are going to be sold here.
But they can never come.
And I mean, we go to Giorgio Armani, you know, and it's going to be cheap because here, but it's going to be $200, whatever, and the real cost of that product is maybe $4. Maybe we don't see it because this is too familiar for the US, no? The culture of shopping and nice shopping is nice, it's good, we enjoy, it's pleasure to buy and buy deals in an outlet, no? It's nice. But this is in a way confronting this idea, this model, that in order to have these prices, we need this, no? Indirectly, and that's a paradox. That's the reason why I'm here doing research, because I'm in the center of the paradox. And our mechanisms that in a way dehumanize the other. Because of course, if we see this, I'm afraid of what is on the back. If we need this, it's because it's a real problem over there. It's an incredible investment in money, personnel, and 0.001% of the people who cross undocumented are going to cross here. The majority of the people, because of that, are forced to be to the Arizona desert. And in a way, they are trying to prevent something that is not possible to prevent, because with this concentration of wealth, what we are creating is creating more extreme poverty in the world. And the extreme poverty, instead of eliminating the desire to cross or the need to cross, people is thinking that possibility to save their life.
We are not allowed to approach the wall. where the wall runs into the Pacific Ocean. People on the Mexican side can come up to the wall, they can reach through it, they can wave at us, and we are prohibited from touching the wall and going to it.
So my name is Zach. I'm a park ranger here at Coronado National Memorial. And just working here, I would say every day I would get someone coming in and talking who wants to talk about the border, who wants to talk about a wall or a fence or something like that. We're going to jump back 500 years ago. This border physically or even on maps did not exist, right? We had many different indigenous cultures here. Especially once you're up top, I suggest that you kind of picture that process going through time when you're looking at a border. Because when you're up there, not every border is as obvious as the one side we have here. If you look to the west, we're going to see land, and maybe land almost as a, not to put personal opinions, but just as land how it naturally is, right? How it should be. When you put a big physical barrier in ecosystems, what happens, right? That there's a lot of disturbances. So working with Mexico, working with borders and customs, there are ways that we try to keep those disturbances at a minimum, but it's inevitable if you are building a 17-foot fence, right?
How far does the fence come now?
Yeah,
then?
so it comes in a quarter mile into the park and stops. And then from there it's just barbed wire, and in some parts there'll be anti-vehicle posts. But as you can see, it's mountain. You're not going to drive over that in your car. You know, I don't work for Border Patrol, but talking a little bit about them, they have some new technologies up top. Once you're looking up there, you can check out, there's, on the peak over there, there's a big tower, which uses technologies. Did you see a big blimp?
No.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. I was driving.
I was like, what is that? Okay,
Yeah, so it, you know, some people will say it's, you know, just a blimp, weather stuff, but it's a little more. It's connected through border movements, and basically using modern technologies can detect a lot of not just aircraft, low-flying aircraft, but things on the border, that kind of thing. So what I'm getting at is there's a lot of technologies used now, and that would probably contribute to this, the less amount.
That's Nick? No. It's Rambo. Get it. So much breathing. Are we going? I'm gonna send it.
What's happening? Are you Googling if
Sean,
we just
Sean doesn't know where the trail. Yeah. Wait. Here, look over here, everyone. Hello. Okay, that was one with you in the bottom right hand corner.
John, you didn't chirp, bro. You didn't chirp hard.
Yeah, and then I watched Sean say when we were walking together.
The Southside Presbyterian Church is affiliated with John Fife, who is the founder of the sanctuary movement in the United States. And in fact, he conducts part of the class for the Samaritans.
In 1994, the same year that the North American Free Trade Agreement was implemented, the United States, for political reasons, said, we're going to try to control the border. We're going to control the border. And they're still saying it, of course. They said, if we replace in those urban areas the 8-foot cyclone fence, which is the border in those areas, with 18-foot steel walls, quadruple the number of Border Patrol agents, add technology, we believe we can seal off those urban areas from migration. And they said, we understand that once we do that, we know what's going to happen. People are going to start to go around, right? But the but was, now when they try to cross, they will have to go through their words in their planning documents were the most hazardous areas of the border. So what they succeeded in doing about the end of the 90s was funneling all the migration and drug trafficking right through the Tucson sector. And we have been the epicenter of that migration pattern ever since. Every one of those red dots is where they found a recovered human remain. If most of the death out there is from dehydration and heat stroke, we need to put water out in the desert. And so we formed an organization called Humane Borders that puts 55-gallon water drums out in sites. I think there are 45 sites now. The point was, we need to confront the Border Patrol enforcement strategy by documenting their violations of human rights in the desert, as well as saving lives. The Border Patrol tried to get us out of the desert, right? One of the other ways was they, with the approval of the command structure here, started destroying water on the migrant trails that we left, slashing the water bodies. And so we put motion-sensitive video cameras after a while on those sites and caught them in living color and gave it to the press and media.
That's nice. Talk to him through and drink the Gatorade. It's not the trash.
And suddenly they wanted to talk. And we reached an agreement in 2013 that recognized the camp as a humanitarian aid medical facility, and recognized No More Deaths and Samaritans volunteers as humanitarian aid workers, under international standards, Red Cross standards, as a matter of fact. And they agreed to stop slashing humanitarian aid on the trails and to train their agents in those Red Cross international standards, right? And that held for 4 years, and then we had an election last year. And so in May and June this year, the Border Patrol raided the camp again, took out migrants who were receiving medical care there, and threatened us all with charges for harboring and aiding and abetting migrants. And the courts threw out those charges. So we're 39-0 in terms of our track record with our legal advocates, winning all of them and the government not winning any. Every nation has a right to establish a border and to enforce that border. They do not have a right, under human rights and international law, to kill thousands of people in that enforcement plan. Make sure you understand, it is the legal right of civil society, all of us, to directly protect the victims of human rights violations when government is the violator. and to hold the government accountable for those violations of human rights.
They're not going to be able to let me record, but I'll record us walking in as far as I can.
They take your phone.
Do they take your phone?
Yeah, I'm gonna at least.
Relax, sleep forward.
We met with an immigration attorney with the DMRS, which provides legal help for undocumented migrants.
One of the biggest problems with our system right now is that the line for a lot of people is over 30 years long. So if you wanted to just come legally and you were 18, you might be able to come in by the time you were 50. Many people will die before they'll immigrate. The issue is that the visas aren't available. So these people are standing in a line that's not moving. Our system has always been set up to make sure that the poorest and the least educated and we're not a system that's set up for just anyone to be able to come into our country. The biggest obstacle in proving an asylum case is usually proving a nexus or the actual persecution. The courts in this circuit have already found that gang recruitment is not a reason to grant asylum. It's not a sufficient persecution for purposes of asylum. It's not because there's not a fear. It's not because they're basically either not proving that the government's not doing something about the problem, which the Guatemalan government, I don't know how embroiled they are with these gangs, but if nothing else, they're absolutely controlled by them. I can't tell you how many times I've come into contact with somebody who the story was just so, like compelling to me, but I couldn't make the case. And it's just, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to know that you're basically sending someone to their death, because that's essentially what you're doing when you lose an asylum case.
¿No están en la escuela?
No. Yo fui mentirosa. Yo no.
¿No tienen escuela en la tarde?
¿Tú por qué estás de
¿En la mañana? Oh, por el frío no tuvieron escuela. Oh, that's why she has her grandchildren. Because Estela couldn't come, her grandchildren are with her. See, I told somebody yesterday, any cold, any rain, people don't go to school.
Oh, ¿quieres que
so
yo
they're
abra?
not in school right now because it's cold.
¿Cuántos años tiene? ¿4?
Sí. Tenemos que irnos. We gotta go.
Chao, princesa. Adiós, nos vemos. Bye bye. ¿Cómo te llamas? Gordo.
Héctor se llama.
Annunciation House is an organization that is now 40 years old. It operates houses of hospitality right on the United States-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas. El Paso is one of the major crossing points for refugees and immigrants. When they enter the United States, we provide hospitality to some of those refugees and immigrants. So Annunciation House came into existence after more than a year of discernment by a group of young adults. One day, when someone who had no place to go, we referred to the Salvation Army, they came back and they said, "Where you sent me, they will not help me." And we said, "Why? You're homeless. Why won't?" And they said, "Porque no tengo papeles," because I'm undocumented. We didn't know that in El Paso, in 1978, there were only 2 shelters, and neither of those shelters would provide lodging if someone was undocumented. What would be one of the groups that God would identify with? And the answer was very clear, the undocumented. So we started saying, then you can stay with us. And there came to be a day when in this building, we had over 115 people. All word of mouth, all of them undocumented. The numbers of people that have stayed with us are no longer in the thousands, nor even in the tens of thousands. We're now measuring them in the hundreds of thousands. The idea that if tomorrow we allow, say, 25,000 Central Americans to come in, the idea that those 25,000 people are going to increase crime, that actually is measured. And the FBI will tell you that the safest communities in the United States are communities that have large immigrant population. People don't want to hear that. People want to say, no. Look in the newspaper. Here it says, an undocumented person shot someone. Well, if that's how we're going to have our discussions, then here's an article. This doctor was arrested for malpractice. All doctors must be terrible doctors if we're going to use that way of having discussions. If we make any changes in asylum law, that people are going to come in and basically they're going to lie. They're going to lie to us and people are going to be given asylum. That's not the way asylum works. You have to document your claim. That's one of what makes it so hard to even get asylum. We are working with a woman that is presently in detention here in El Paso. She's from Ecuador. She passed her credible fear and she's now going to immigration court, and she was given a day by when she had to submit her asylum application. She has to turn in all her supporting documentation because once it's submitted, the judge can refuse to accept any additional documentation. This is her application. Okay? Now tell me how easy is it for someone to show up at the bridge, at the port of entry, and say, "I'm afraid, give me asylum"? How easy is that? All of this was done pro bono, but it gives you an idea of what an asylum application looks like. It's very challenging. I'm one of those people that will challenge other people to define for themselves, who do I really want to be? As a U.S. citizen, why do you even want to give asylum? Why not just withdraw the United States from the convention? Let's take back, we signed up, we helped create it. Mm-hmm. Then why don't we withdraw? Why don't we just pull out and say, we don't believe in it? Why don't we do that? Because we like to think of ourselves as people that are committed to the dignity, to the viability, to the integrity of human beings. We like to see, you know that big statue in New York Harbor? We look at that statue and that fills us with pride. We like to say, that's who we are. And right now, we're finding ourselves in a real predicament because we're also saying, We don't want these people.
Wow, these are really reflective.
Yes, yes,
Oh, I
yes,
do not have
indeed.
shades.
Robin Hoover has worked with the state government, with individuals to get permission to cross ranches, to put these on private property, to put these on public property, to be able to set up the water stations. He takes us into the desert, into remote regions, shows us where the water stations are, but also tells us about his own experiences and the experiences of other people.
We had 6 trucks running several times a week each, had hundreds of local volunteers trained. Our primary purpose was to ameliorate the conditions that exist out here. Our secondary was to, by doing that, to have a seat at the table and to have a legitimate voice in the public discourse. We have long, rich history of encountering migrants. We would do orientation. Do you know where you are? Do you know where you're going? Do you have enough water? Do you need any medical? Do you need to make any emergency calls? We can't call your family. We cannot put you in the vehicle unless it's a medical emergency. The problem when we established Humane Borders, we had to have a quote disturbed area where you could, and you had to be able to drive to it to be able to service the station, etc. That meant that the migrants were on roads or near roads or a few miles off a road or whatever. And now they're pushing them so far away, the migrants are dying farther and farther away from those kinds of locations. So the effectiveness of Humane Borders has plummeted. No more deaths, and the Samaritans are going out and making water drops where they have to carry the water in another mile or so and drop it off.
We brought about 40 people out here and had a memorial service for these 3 people because we figured nobody'd ever know who the hell they were or where they're from or anything. They were all Guatemalan nationals. One woman took a .223 round across her rib cage, sternum rib cage, just a perfect slash, just Heidelberg scar style. She bent over and nearly bled out on the lap of the guy that actually was the coyote. 43 days later, that was February 8th, 2008, I think. She had a sweatshirt that was cut down below the wound, and the wound had not been taken care of completely properly. I know that because I used to be a surgical intensive care nurse. When they released him, 43 days later, he was wearing the blood-soaked jeans that she had bled out on him. That's an agency that's out of control. You know, I have one word for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Am I on camera? Fuck them. If you want to represent the United States, its values, its traditions, and its laws, you do not abuse people like that. You show them what the United States stands for. If you want, a cop is not a court. You have no right to pass judgment on any human being absent a court order. Period. And separate courts for immigration and the U.S. criminal justice system is separate and not equal. And if you want to represent me, I want you to represent the United States. And the United States does not do that kind of law enforcement.
Since about 2000, we've lost an average of 160 to 200 people a year out here in the desert. Nobody knows the numbers. They recover somewhere around 180 a year on average now. Pima County government thinks it's good politics, makes sense, and it's responsible public policy to spend money in the Forensic Science Center to identify the remains and return them to their families, to do the work right. And right now we have more than 500 unidentified remains. There's no marker, there's no identification, it's A, B, C, D. They have a map that shows, so there's a vault in here that's about this big, there's a partition. So there may be 4, 5, 6 boxes in this one right here. Same. So these are cremains of unidentified people from Pima County.
There's religion in the Humane Borders deal, and it's not just because of me. Religion is a much more powerful presence in migration than human rights. Religious groups have entirely different motivations, and they have entirely different staying power, different resources, different volunteers, different infrastructure. They've got what it takes to do migration policy impact over time. Now, I'm going to just simply describe to you what the United States is doing. You build fences, you put up surveillance, you block off areas. You saw the fence, about a third of it's built, most of it's vehicle barricades, some of it's pedestrian, some of it's bollard-style fencing, etc. There's 12 different models. They want to make it expensive to enter into the United States. This is a vestige of an old neoliberal economic model that if you make it expensive to come, fewer people will come. What they don't understand is you have now just giving billions of dollars to our enemies in the cartels. And it kills migrants because it commodifies individuals. If I have to recover $3,000 or $5,000 in the migration, I'm going to stay longer and I'll just pay for it that way. Number 4, make it as miserable as possible if you do enter into the United States. That is the only one that works. You saw part of it the other day. Let me explain this. Operation Streamline works in the sense that you make it so frickin' miserable to be apprehended that you don't want to do it again. That one does have consequences. Those people don't come back for the most part. But it works for that migrant, it doesn't work for migration. We have a contract here in the United States with private and public prisons to maintain 34,000 beds a night just for undocumented people. 43% of the people who came here, who are undocumented, came here illegally. They overstayed their visa. What does that tell you? Just let that sink in. Almost half don't fit any of these profiles of what you're thinking about. I need to talk about Border Patrol. It's increasingly militarized. The United States is the only major military that prefers working at night. They have a perceived tactical advantage. It's preferred working conditions for agents. Border Patrol has a practice called dusting. They'll come in with a helicopter and they'll let the prop wash, rotor wash, dust an area in the creosote, mesquite bushes, etc. And they'll come back in a couple hours and see if anybody has walked through that area. Here's a helicopter doing it, and when I sit there and show them a helicopter violating airspace rules and the flight rules of the entire air wing of the Border Patrol in the Tucson sector, they're not authorized to do that, and coming in and making a run right there and dusting an area. Well, he must have been about to land. No, lady, they come in with choppers, then they'll send guys on the ground
and women on the ground, and they'll catch as many as they can. Sun comes up, and the ones that they didn't catch no longer have a guide. It's pretty much like taking the life preserver out of a sinking boat and leaving people in the boat. Border Patrol invented these little stations you see over there on the left. It has a strobe light on the top that's operated by the solar panel, and it has a little radio system inside that box. And it has a metal reflector up there that gets your attention during the day on the sunlight. It's kind of like a mirror. I said, you build a bunch of these, you put them in all the strategic locations, I'll pull my water stations and go somewhere else. There's a lot of desert. If you can start saving lives, do it. It works. But they, by God, will not make enough of them and won't distribute them. They've given up on this system. They want, and I cannot conclude anything else, but they want more migrant deaths out there. They think it's a deterrent. 1/2 of all the Border Patrol rescues that they take credit for are self-initiated by migrants using cell phones to tell them where they are. I said, fine, let's put out get more cell phones out here. So I got the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection and the SBI net people. I said, you're building all these freaking towers. Put a 911 repeater, weighs about 2 pounds, fuel it from the power that you already have on that site. You have the environmental waiver. You've got the dirt, the power, the technology, and the tower. It already exists. Put it on there. And buck boost that signal back to Pima County. We'll come find them. I got Pima County government. I got people from Mexico, from Sonora, from Washington, I had people from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, all in this meeting. Well, we can't do that because that would be your equipment on our tower. I said, fuck it, buy a goddamn 911 receiver and just send me the signal. I'm not coming to your tower. Just share the information, public information. They will not frickin' do a goddamn thing to save the life of a migrant. I said, we'll buy the equipment. Pima County government wanted the Border Patrol to provide the signal of where to do the search and rescue. Goddamn won't do it.
My name is Stephen. I'm a Humane Borders volunteer and board member, and we're going out today on the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge run. There's 7 water stations. We have to check the water stations every week, partly because of vandalism. One of the things that happens is that vigilantes shoot the water stations with guns. They steal them, remove the spigots, and throw them into the woods and then dump all the water. We've had to put locks on the water barrels because last winter about this time 2 of the water stations were contaminated, one with gasoline and one with turpentine. We test the water for particulates. We taste it, we smell it. If it doesn't seem good, we replace it, we dump the water and put a new barrel on. It's very difficult to predict what the water use is going to be. It's going to be low, relatively speaking, because for some reason most of the crossing is in the summer when it's really dangerous. People also do freeze to death in this weather. The number of bodies in the Tucson sector is about 150 on average. The number of deaths is probably a lot more than the number of bodies that are found, because what happens is the bodies are skeletonized sometimes within just a couple of days by coyotes and birds, and then the bones are scattered by predators.
So would you say if we're in the summer right now doing this that we would possibly encounter people?
Well, this is where I heard people in the brush here, but we can walk down a ways if you want. We can give people water, which we have plenty of, and some food, We have a first aid kit. Give the person or people that if they need it. Usually they have very bad blisters on their feet. But that's it. If the person is in trouble, maybe totally debilitated or even near death, then the only thing we can do is call the Border Patrol. These crosses really bring it home for me because a real person died right here. And so I like to always say something like, we're really sorry that you died here, and we hope that you, wherever you are, it's in a better place, and that nobody else dies here.
The plan that I have offered started receiving accolades in the West Wing in 2003, and we haven't taken one step towards it. In my opinion, there's only one rational way to make this thing work. We are spending 24 times the amount of money on enforcement today than we were spending in '86. And guess what? Enforcement does not work. Is there any other conclusion that you can come from this? The number of undocumented people rose. The number of people who have overstayed has rose. You're spending 24 times as much money, and you got 5 times as many agents, and you want to tell me you want me to give you more money to do something that doesn't work? That's like betting on a tape-delayed football game and thinking the result's going to be different this time. Most members of Congress, on the right or the left, liberal or conservative, wherever they stand on immigration, their salary depends upon them not understanding what we're telling them. You can go over there and wave 300,000 pages of dissertations and stuff in their face, and they don't freaking get it. They're not going to get it. Their salary depends upon them not getting it. They can raise money, pro or con, on immigration based on simply taking that position and voting consistently in that pattern. That's it. They don't have to do anything else. They don't need you in their face. They don't need you in their office. You are irrelevant. They don't want an expert. You hear people talking about deporting everybody just rapidly like we did during Operation Wetback or something like that. That is disruptive to the economy. So you need to stage this, spread this thing out. Based on thousands of interviews that I've done, or at least questioning, I can tell you most migrants who are south of the border do not want to become U.S. citizens. Let that sink in. They want to participate in this economy. So you just say, here's the rules. I need to know who you are. You come in here and we will vet you. We will background check you. The United States Labor Department would set quotas for 2-year visas just for Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We're going to say, look, work visas are exempt from the worldwide quota of visas, and these people who come here and work could become eligible for citizenship. If you want to become a citizen, you go get in the naturalization line. It can be completed in absentia. So maybe you applied, you got your visa and it's only for 2 years and it's going to take you years to become a citizen. You go home, but you're still in line. Okay? It's acceptable. You can allow the visa holders to travel, to buy cars and homes, start businesses. You can do whatever you want to. You're here. You're going to treat these migrants who are coming up here just like an H-1 visa holder, all right, which they can do this stuff. Why can't the person that's working down here in the field do that? You would open
the $2,500 should be changed to $4,500 security account with the Internal Revenue Service. There is no organization in the world that is more efficient or effective than the Internal Revenue Service when it comes to assigning a number, opening an account, attaching it to a name, and tracking that person to find out where they are. The IRS is pretty damn good. You're going to put some money into this account, and every paycheck that you work, we're going to deduct 10% of the gross wages and add to that account. It's just going to keep growing like crazy. Using Pew Hispanic numbers, on average, the account is going to accrue for 2 years. And when the visa expires, the migrant transfers those funds electronically and goes home. Using Pew numbers, they should be somewhere in the vicinity of $8,000 at the end of this time, okay? If there's no compliance with the visa, if you don't go home, your funds are forfeited to law enforcement. I don't want U.S. taxpayer dollars paying Border Patrol needless money for one agent to apprehend 2 migrants a month. That's bullshit. I want the migrants' money on account with the IRS, and if he screws up, or she, the money is forfeited to law enforcement, and if they've got $8,000 in that account, I can find you, and I know where you've been working. It's public record. So for the first time in U.S. immigration law history, we would have an economic incentive to comply with the terms of a visa. The employers would have a stable, predictable system. They know that every 2 years I got to train a new person for job X. Doesn't mean that person can't come back, but they got to go back and get into their system in their country in order to come here. The Department of Homeland Security personnel would be freed up to look for bad guys, and we would have increased national security because you'd know who is here. Basic rights would be extended since the people would have a right to be present. The migrants would share more of the cost of participating in our system. We're going to hunt for them with their money, not ours. The Mexican cartel revenues would drop dramatically.
Anything for asylees?
Not on this one, sorry. My brain ain't that big. Now, these are real bullet points that you can talk to liberals and conservatives about and say, why are we throwing money after an enforcement system that doesn't work? My plan is a Marshall Plan for the Western Hemisphere because you bring human resources here, you send them back home with money, skills, knowledge, ability, English proficiency, and business acumen, knowledge of our tools, and you have customers sitting there that are yearning for that DeWalt tool that they got to use in the job in the United States, or that dental hygiene product, or whatever the hell it was. Again, I'll say the same thing that's at the beginning of this. A law enforcement only approach reveals a stunning lack of imagination. Only a critically focused, bipartisan political solution was going to address these issues. Walking into Congress and saying, to hell with borders ain't going to work. Only an insistent public will create the political will. That's what the group in Phoenix is about. Puente and some other groups are trying to create political will to get something done.
I think my students learn that when we discuss immigration, it's simply not a political issue, that it's a question of human rights and lives are on the line. And I think they learn by being in the place where people cross, by talking to people who work with migrants. If there's a controversial topic that we need to pay attention to in this country, I really want my students to look for more information, to process the information, and to understand that you cannot discuss any issue simply. You cannot just say, this is the way it is, and that's the way it is, and I'm not going to learn anything more about it.